My wedding to my ex was a complete circus. This is a long one, but I think it pays off lol. I got married when I was 21, to someone totally wrong for me. BC My mother had just died a few months before and I wasn't in my right mind. My wedding woke up that morning and decided on violence. But, to be completely frank, it was a disaster months before it even happened. My fiancé proposed to me in a packed restaurant on my B-day in front of all of my loved ones, when he knew I dislike public proposals. He knew there was no way I was saying no in front of all of those PPL. I had a bunch of confidence and self-esteem issues, so part of me thinks his choice was pure emotional manipulation. Anyway, unfortunately, about a year later, were absolutely no talk of a wedding. I didn't want to marry him. My mother passed away. That sent me into a tailspin, and for witty reason, I thought getting married was the right move. So we set a date. Originally, my fiancé wanted October 9, 2011, BC 9-1011. But that was legit only 4 months away. I convinced him to push it back to deck, but he was definitely trying to make it happen ASAP. He took over all of the wedding planning. The only contribution of mine was my favorite color and the idea for a photo booth. He didn't want a wedding full of unnecessary flowers, so we only had my bouquet made. He shot down my idea of a buffet-type setup for our food, and refused to allow more than one starch, so I sacrificed corn for mashed potatoes. He had me walking down the aisle to some Swedish electronica. He insisted that our wedding favors, if you could even call them that, be these circular pieces of a yellow stone. The stone was important to him. BC His mom had loved it and even tried to start a small business around the stone right before her own passing 3 years before. They handed them out at her funeral, and fiancé was insistent we pass them out at the wedding. Look, I totally get it, my mother was dead, too, so I empathized. But that's part of the point. Where does my mother, who I'd so recently lost, fit into his plans? The answer is nowhere. On to the actual wedding. I drink about half a bottle of whiskey on my own in the dressing rooms, and before I know it, I'm almost stumbling, but not down the aisle. I can't accurately describe how drunk I was while still somehow managing to be semi-normal. Liquid courage and all that. I somehow managed to make it smoothly through my vows, that he made me change. By the way, BC, I had playful teasing and banter in them, and he thought it was disrespectful to the serious commitment we are making. Okay, fine, with E. But then we get to his vows. And he calls for a guitar from his best man. And he sings his vows. He was not a good singer. Nor a good writer, poet. Music was not a huge factor in our lives. I have never expressed a desire to be serenaded at any point. In fact, I've stated the opposite. And this man made me change my vows. But he didn't care about me in that moment, he cared about putting on a show for the audience. With his horrible singing and atrocious rhyme schemes. Do y'all know how hard it was to stand there and continue to try and stare lovingly into his eyes? I was so drunk and it was so mortifying. TBH, I'm surprised I didn't disappear out of sheer embarrassment. I wish I'd just picked up my skirts and run away, briddied myself to freedom. But I didn't, and so instead of tearing down the highway with my best friends, I sat at our table during the reception and watched as the best man performed a 3 minutes long tap dance routine in lieu of a speech. It was absurd, from beginning to end. I filed for divorce 9 months later. Lol. Shoes for printer. I was working at Staples as an easy tech computer nerd many years ago. One night I was locking the front door as a nicely dressed man approached the entrance. He told me he's just about to send his daughter away to art school that night and that he very badly needed some kind of photo printer to send with her. He seemed like a nice guy, so I told him if he came in quickly and just bought what I recommended that I would make it work for him. He agreed happily. I sold him a fairly nice Canon photo printer that we kept a few of but hardly ever sold. Just as I was printing his receipt, he asked me for my shoe size. Confused, I asked why. He told me he works for a shoe company and that he would love to send me a pair of nice shoes as a thank you for helping him out. I told him my shoe size, and nervously wrote my address on the back of the receipt. He shook my hand and thanked me profusely in front of my manager, and left with the printer, extra ink, and my shoe size plus address. Fast forward maybe an entire year. I came home from school one day to get ready for my shift at a restaurant, as I didn't work at Staples any longer. There was a package on my doorstep, brand new suede Clarks, his business card, and a thank you letter. Since, I have worn these shoes to multiple weddings, funerals, and other various events. I call them my printer shoes. Nothing is cooler than when complete strangers pull through on something for you out of nothing but appreciation. I nearly got kidnapped by drug addicts while on acid. Me and my friend went out to find nature and we put it on before going out. Our friends were too tired to go out and sit us, we couldn't find the nature and accidentally went to the cemetery, so we decided to go home, utterly confused and disoriented. We tried to call taxi but we couldn't remember the address as it was too confusing, so we went on by foot to get into the city. While attempting to call taxi for the third time we sat down and in a minute or so 4 to 5 men approached us and asked for a cig. We told them that we don't have it and they started talking some shit as to why were we so scared or something, asked us where we live and other things and then told us to get into the car and they would take us home. I denied and then they started asking what do we have and if we have more, cause supposedly their guy was going through withdrawal. I have a self-defense mechanism which I imprinted into my brain that I will not get into the car of a stranger at whatever cost. I'd rather die there fighting than get in. They had made a corridor to an open car door and I decided that I must run, so did my friend. We tried running but things got physical and they tried catching us. After a bit of wrestling I got away but my friend was caught by 2 of them. He still somehow slipped away and we ran as much as we could. He lost his home keys in the process. I told all of them that we were both 17, not from this city, and lied that we took X and had no more. I imagine what drug addicts on withdrawal would do to us. The visuals were insane, their skin rotting and shit as we were in a peak of the trip. It was stressing but we managed to survive the natural selection. Do not make the same mistake as we did and plan your trip well, with a sitter before taking psychedelics. I have a trigger on red hair beard now and I think I got a bit traumatized, but diamonds are created under pressure. Regardless, it was a good lesson for both of us. P.S. This all happened in the middle of the day, on a street with people. I scared the poop out of a coworker. At my old job I worked at a factory as a janitor. I had a lazy coworker who barely pulled his weight to help me and my coworkers to get the job done. He would rather play on his phone and watch TikTok or go around and talk to other factory workers. One day it was just me and him. He went into the bathroom and he was in there for 30 minutes and I went to check on him to see if he was okay, but as I walked in he was standing there watching TikTok with his back turned. And I slowly go up behind and I screamed at him. He jumps and he blew this screaming wet duck fart that lasted for 10 seconds and he runs into the stall. He starts screaming, "You made me shit my fucking pants. These are the last clean underwear and pants I have." And I burst into laughter which enraged him even more. He stays in there for 30 minutes cleaning himself up. As he came out I see a massive brown stain on his pants. I burst into more laughter. For the rest of the shift every factory worker kept coming up to him and asking him if he's been taking it up the ass lately. My best friend is a narcissistic, and I snapped at her. I won't reveal my age, but all I can say is that this all happened at school. When I was in 9th grade, I met this girl, smart, sharp-witted and didn't let people put her down. I thought it was co-op, considering that me myself can't insult anyone without feeling bad. She kind of adopted me. We became friends very quickly. Our moms became besties too. It was like a dream of having a sister for myself. But then I noticed some stuff. Like when I said I was getting better at some grades. I'm kinda of dumb when it comes to studying, but I'm very clever. I'm not stupid. When I say, "I studied for this," she replied, "Doesn't even look like it." And the most important thing, many people don't like her. She laughs too loud. She's mocking anyone who says shit about her, and don't doubt, she will put you down if she's in a bad mood. Lately, I switched schools. We weren't studying together but we were still close. I've been feeling confident, wearing makeup, clothes that I like. I'm chubby, but she'd make an expression of both mockery masking disdain. And would say, "Girlie, I don't want you to feel bad." And that would make me very sad. One day, we were playing Minecraft together, and we were on call. She asked how I got to buy the game and I answered that I used my job money. She laughed, "That shitty place got you to buy Minecraft?" I'm surprised, and began making questions like, "But don't you pay the bills?" "Wow, I'm shocked that you could afford it. You're like the poor friend." And she laughed again. My blood boiled. She knows I go through some hardships financially. That made me raise a red flag but I let it go. Then, I noticed some things. I was good in things she wasn't good, like writing, English, and other things in general. And that infuriated her. In school assignments to write short stories, I always won. In English classes, everyone would ask for my help, and not hers. One day, I was at work, at an office, overwhelmed with paperwork and in a bad mood. Then she texted me. My phone is connected to my PC so it's not like I could ignore the beeping sound of texts. I sighed, stopping everything I was doing to answer her. The text made me pause. I need your help with a name for a book character I'm creating. I sighed, then texted, I'm working. Later. She replied, come on, just a name, it won't be that bad. And began a whole monologues about the story she was creating, always with mistakes and cracks in the lore. I was tired, ignoring her texts and just working, but then she called me, and I declined, texting her. Search on Google, I'm working. And she got mad, saying that I should help her, that it's not her fault I have to work. I snapped, I grabbed my phone and went to the bathroom, texting the biggest text of my life. That her story was trash, the lore didn't make sense, and that it's not my fault she's jobless, being pampered by her boyfriend who looked sick of her, and her mother. And that if she wanted to make herself look better than me, she'd have to go trough all the shit I went trough, and I admitted, I went trough far worse than her. I was furious, give me a break, I was having a full evening of work. She got mad, but was silent, not texting me again about it. Special ed student farts on teacher for being an asshole. There was a teacher in my high school who was a toxic liberal male feminist in his mid-late 30s with a bald spot and sometimes wore a fedora hat to cover it up, and he had a greasy neck beard. He served as a substitute and sometimes an aide for pupils who have special needs. I've had him as a substitute a couple times and he was not well liked by other pupils, and some of the school staff couldn't stand him either due to his toxicity and creepy vibes. He was very mean to pupils who had special needs. One time in class he was aiding this pupil who had autism and anger issues, and the aide and the pupil got into an argument which I can't recall what it was about. So, this aide carried a man purse and reached down to grab something. So the pupil got up on his chair, bent over and had his head turned to him. As the aide got done searching in his purse, he turned around and seen him standing on his chair, and he says, Austin, why are you standing on your chair? So Austin grabs him by the head and rips a fart into his face, and the entire classroom burst into laughter, and the aide runs out of there and begins to cry, and the special ed kid got sent down to the principal office. When class was over and I was walking down in the hallways, I seen the aide sobbing to other teachers that he never felt humiliated in his entire life, and the teachers consoled him and asked if buying him dairy ice cream would cheer him up. He said yes, and they bought him some. Who knew that ice cream could cure woes? Weird conversation. It's 1 a.m. and I was laying in bed. I hear these men argue and one just start yelling, quadruple A, it was purposeful and forced. I thought about how inconsiderate they were and just some teens doing it for attention joke. Then I get this idea that perhaps it was safety issues and someone might need help. I ran to the window and see a man, A, beating another man, B, that was leaning on this car. Then B starts screaming, go fuck yourselves, repeatedly while chasing A. As A is quickly walking away he says, look people, this is a man who abuses your children. Then they went out of my sight. And B returns in a while, then picks his scooter and disappears in the same direction. Also I recall that B initially had an over-the-shoulder bag and returned with it. And yes, I can't sleep now and wish I would have eavesdropped to understand the situation better. I'm lying to everyone. When I was in elementary school I rode the bus to and from school. One day on the bus I farted while sitting next to my friends. I was at the age where we believed that if it's your fart you can't smell it, and this fart that I just unleashed upon my friends was not something I could smell. But they were able to smell it and it smelt bad. When my friends accused me of being the one who farted, I said the reason I couldn't smell it was because I didn't have a sense of smell because my nose was crooked. This was true, my nose was crooked and I had a deviated septum that I eventually got fixed. But I did still have my sense of smell. Ever since that day I have told every single person I've ever met that I don't have a sense of smell. When I got my first job, one of my coworkers became obsessed with trying to prove me wrong and even said it was impossible. After some research I found that there is a condition called anosmia where someone can partially or completely lose smell. Since then I've always claimed to have this condition, and because no one can prove it's false I'm able to get away with it. I always do my absolute best to never react to smells, and I've gotten very good at it. I'm still able to smell everything perfectly and I really enjoy some smells, but I never talk about smells and I never try to smell something more than once so I don't make it obvious. I don't know why I ever started this lie or why I even keep it going, but I feel that at this point I'm too deep and I can't turn back now. The Great Coffee Shop Mix-Up. Let me tell you about a classic episode starring my cousin, the guy who can turn even the simplest errands into unforgettable adventures. So, one Saturday morning, we decided to hit up this new trendy coffee shop that had just opened downtown. Everyone was raving about their exotic blends and fancy latte art, so we thought we'd give it a try. We walk in, and the place is packed. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee fills the air, and there's this buzz of conversation and clinking cups. My cousin, ever the caffeine enthusiast, is practically vibrating with excitement. We get in line, and he starts studying the menu like it's a final exam. They had all sorts of complicated drinks with names I couldn't even pronounce. But my cousin zeroes in on something called the triple shot espresso avalanche. Sounded intense, but hey, that's his style. When it's our turn, he steps up confidently and says, "I'll have one triple shot espresso avalanche, please." The barista nods and asks for his name to write on the cup. My cousin replies, "Mark." Simple enough, right? We step aside to wait for our drinks, and that's when things get interesting. A few minutes later, the barista calls out, "Triple shot espresso avalanche for Mike." My cousin, distracted by a pastry display, doesn't react. I nudge him and say, "I think that's yours." He scoffs, "No, I said Mark, not Mike. That must be someone else's." I roll my eyes but decide not to argue. Another couple of minutes pass, and the barista calls out again, louder this time, "Triple shot espresso avalanche for Mike." Still, my cousin refuses to acknowledge it. Meanwhile, a guy named Mike actually steps up, looks confused because he didn't order that, shrugs, and takes the drink. Now my cousin is getting impatient. He marches up to the counter and says, "Excuse me, but I ordered a triple shot espresso avalanche like 10 minutes ago." The barista looks puzzled and says, "Oh, we called that out twice already for Mike." My cousin, with a dramatic sigh, says, No, it's Mark, not Mike." The barista checks the order slip and says, "Oh, sorry about that. We'll make you a new one right away." Satisfied, my cousin steps back. We wait another few minutes, and finally, the barista calls out, "Triple shot espresso avalanche for Mark." My cousin walks up triumphantly, grabs the cup, and takes a big, satisfying sip. But the moment the liquid hits his tongue, his eyes go wide, and he does this exaggerated spit take right back into the cup. "Ah, this is soy milk," he exclaims loudly. The entire cafe turns to look at us. I'm trying to disappear into my hoodie at this point. The barista looks horrified and says, "I'm so sorry. That was supposed to be with regular milk." She takes the cup back and promises to make a new one ASAP. We wait again, and finally, the third time's the charm. My cousin gets his drink, takes a cautious sip, and nods approvingly. But as we're walking out, he trips over absolutely nothing and the entire cup flies out of his hand, spinning through the air in slow motion before landing squarely on his own shoe, splattering coffee everywhere. The whole cafe gasps, and there's a moment of stunned silence before everyone bursts into laughter, including me. My cousin just stands there, coffee-soaked and defeated, before joining in the laughter himself. We ended up getting free pastries out of pity from the staff, so it wasn't a total loss. And now, every time we pass that coffee shop, we can't help but laugh about the great coffee disaster.